I just saw your message.
Yeah, if you when you think it's the subject you're on, may or may not interest people, but
I think it probably would. Would anyone like to hear something about the console and scheduled tasks on Joomla 4?
Go for it.
Yeah, definitely.
right, okay. Right, yeah, so with Joomla 4, they came up with scheduled tasks, which is supposed to be a replacement for using cron in the like cPanel. If you're using other ones, I don't know what the equivalent is, but yeah, cron. Yeah, and it sounds like a good idea in theory, but it kind of works and it doesn't work from what my experience. A couple of problems with it seem to be that it was done as one of these Google Summer of Code deals, and nobody's really maintained it or done anything with it since it got released. And what I've found is that it's convenient because you can schedule things to happen on your admin page rather than having to go into the cPanel. So if you've got users that you want to say, well, look, you can just go down here and manage your own schedule. They don't have to go into cPanel. But the problem is that it's a little bit more effort to set up. And then what I've found is that it's not really reliable. So I'll see if I can, and I'll try and share the screen. And you're going to allow me to do that?
Yeah.
Disabled it. Yeah, just so people that aren't familiar with it know what it's about.
Can we give Terry hosting power?
Stuart's working on it.
Should be able to share your screen now, Terry.
Okay, that sharing, is it?
Yep.
Okay, so in Joomla 4, under the systems, you have this thing here, schedule, here we go, scheduled tasks. And yeah, so the idea was you're supposed to set up these tasks, which are essentially a plugin or a new form of plugin. And then you can tell your task to go off and basically run on whatever schedule you want it to run. So this is sort of their equivalent to setting the times of when you want it to run. Like, so this one's running on the second minute of every 6 hours, every day of the week, or every Sunday of every month. And then you've got some other settings here. You can get emails when it fails, but I've never managed to get that to work. And yeah, there's just some other little settings here, but the thing that's sort of a little bit backward in what they did, somewhere in the options. Anyway, doesn't really matter. But anyway, so that was what you had to do. You just go in there, you create a plugin that's essentially a task. You set it up, and in here you would say set up a new task. So these ones across the top here are my ones that I've created: inventory, sales, purchases. And then all these other ones, you'll see the Akiva's stuff in their admin tool. And then you'll see some other Joomla stuff, stress memories. Yeah, just sample things you could play with. So you pick one of these things and then you just go in here and set up when you want it to run and etc. The problem that I had with this is these three here that are still running, they essentially just go in and empty a database, a table in a database, so they take sub 1 second to run. These other three that are converted from the old CLI cron setup, they go off to a third-party system, server sitting down somewhere in Melbourne, and retrieves all this inventory data or purchase data regularly, like it's supposed to happen every few hours. basically what happens is it would time out, and I could never figure out how to stop it from timing out. So some days it'd work and it'd work for a week or two, and then all of a sudden it'd just maybe get a big load of data that had to bring across so it'd time out. And so it would actually stop and leave you with a little image here of a picture of a man running, like change the icon. And that was to tell you that the task was still running, but that would sit there for days or weeks or whatever until you came in and cleared it and then started it up again. And this is where the problem I have is, if this task stopped running, every other task that was scheduled to run after it would also stop, and nothing would run until you cleared the one that had failed. And it never noticed that it failed because it never finished. So the whole way it was communicating that things had stopped, it just didn't work. So if you've got a so the upshot is, if you've got a simple task that you want to run regularly, and it's going to be fairly quick and it's quite reliable, and there's nothing else that's going to be concerned if it doesn't run because something else has failed, then scheduled tasks is kind of the way to go. Or if you need to basically supply something for the vendor, for your end users to get in there and manage their own schedule. So it does have its uses, but it's kind of like not quite mature enough, but doesn't seem to be anyone that's making any changes to it or making any improvements. And I'll just see if I can find a picture, something I prepared earlier. So just quickly, if you write, whoops, wrong one. No, that's not the right one either. Where did I put it? Yeah, so if you wanted to write something like this yourself, this is what the plugin looks like. You pretty much just register this piece here, put in the names of your task and what you want to call it and what's got to be executed, and then your task or the code that actually gets executed is this bit here. So it's fairly simple. If you've created a plugin, it's not particularly hard to do. So that's tasks. The other thing they've come up with is a thing called consoles. And what consoles do, I've got it on the right screen, is you use a terminal interface and you can just execute commands. So you find your way to your site either through your cPanel or this is just on a local environment. You type in php joomla.php and you get all these tasks that you can run. So on this particular site, you got the Akiba toys that you can play with. So you can see all the different things that Mr. Akiba lets you do. Then you've got the basic Joomla supplied stuff, which is you can clear your cache, you can clear the database. You can look at what extensions you've got installed. You can get a list of extensions, you can remove them. So it's all if you wanted to automate or set up scripts to install a version of Joomla or update it or update your extensions, whatever. These ones here from inventory, purchase and sales are ones that I've written to do my stuff for my client. And then we're back into all the Joomla stuff again. So what they're trying to do here, if you think back to the cron running tasks in cron, is cron provides the schedule, but you had to put your own CLI together, command line interface, script, whatever you want to call it. And to get that to happen, it got kind of messy because the first part of your script had to load up an instance of Joomla without the GUI interface. And there's a lot of versions of how you could do that. And so everyone just cut and paste the same crappy bit of code in my case. And you run into all sorts of problems for a while until you start to find a bit of code that's minimal that works. So what they did with console was they said, well, we'll take that requirement of you to make a Joomla or create a Joomla instance and we'll put it in the console command or in this Joomla PHP, and then that will just call whatever your own private code is or whatever you want to run. So that was cleaned up the CLI, makes it a lot nicer and tidier, and you can then go back, and like in this case here, I've got my code here, but because I don't like the task or scheduled task thing, I don't know where I'm going to end up here. I've gone back to using the cron, wherever I find it here. So one of these lines here is basically the cron kicking off that console command. So it issues the same Joomla.php, and then I tell it I want to run my script called inventory LL, and I give it a parameter of refresh. So it's a much nicer way of doing it if you don't need to give your users the ability to manage the schedule themselves. So this is kind of like better than Joomla 3, and yeah, it's the best of Joomla 3 and the best of Joomla 4 because you don't use scheduled tasks. And find it now. You input or you install your code as a console command the same way or as a plugin. So they're a little bit more complicated, but you have the same sort of deal here. You have your XML describes your plugin, and you can read all about this sort of stuff. It's not easy to find, but there is a couple of examples out there to do it. But yeah, so you set it up and you've just got a type of where is it up here, group console. So it goes into the console group. And then in these library here, the source library, you've actually got your code, what would normally be the second part of your script, the bit that's doing whatever you want it to do. So where we saw before, I was entering something with a inventory LL. So that's my name up here. Somewhere here, I've got to tell it. Yeah, anyway, I won't go into too much detail, but basically here's all the code that does the, like in this case, it goes out and refreshes the database and gets this remote data. And it's got a bit of a nicer interface. In the old CLI way of thing, you had to change what would normally be like an echo statement. You had to make a this blah blah. Yeah, pretty ugly. So this has a much nicer way of formatting the messages back out to the console. So it's yeah. So anyway, so if you're into writing your own CLI, but you want things to happen automatically, yeah, console with crons, in my opinion, is the way to go. Probably stay away from scheduled tasks unless they do something dramatic and fix it. And yeah, any questions?
Well, we've actually got to figure out why yours never resolves. Like, did you get any sort of meaningful debugging details on that about whether it was a memory fail or it was a connection fail or it was a execution time fail? Did you try extending what the allowances were? What did you try?
Oh, I tried maxing out the memory until it'd blow the server. I went on time. There's very little diagnostics that actually come back out of the thing. And that's the biggest problem. It seems to use some sort of AJAX call to see whether it's still running, or when it completes, it does an AJAX call to the scheduled task to tell it, oh, I've completed. But if your thing blows up in the meantime, that completion never gets signaled. And so therefore the task just thinks it's still running. And you have to go back in and just refresh that page and clear that little running man thing. So that's another reason why I didn't like it, that you can't run a debug on it. There was no way to capture what was happening, where it was even failing. It just stops and there's nothing. It doesn't send me an email, didn't tell me when it failed. which I would have been happier with. Like it says you can send an email, but again, the thing has to finish before it actually will send you the email. So it didn't. Yeah, so it wasn't very helpful.
Terry, what was the command you used to provide that list under the console application?
Yep, it's the screen slot. So that
Okay.
one, you have to find your way into the CLI directory of whatever your Joomla instance. And then you just PHP, and then the actual command or Joomla code is joomla.php. And all they're doing there is just setting up a Joomla instance without the GUI, and you basically register your commands in there. And there's lots of cool stuff in there that are just from the core. And Akiba's got a heap of junk in there that you can amuse yourself with. But it's very good if you've got lots of multiple sites and you don't want to be logging into the sites. For example, with all the Akiba stuff, you don't want to be logging in. You can have scripts that automatically run, issue these commands, and maybe email you the results, rather than you having to go into each site to do it. So that's about the only practical use I could think of some of this stuff. But the extensions one here that tells you what extensions you've got covered. Not a great format, but you could probably extract it out and drop it into a CSV if you wanted to keep a track of all the extensions you've got on your different Joomla instances. And yeah, and these last couple here, the update one, you can that's the same as your install extension manager, just goes off and tells you what you've got due to be updated. So again, you could set up a cron that automatically emails you anything that needs updating without you having to remember to go to the site and look.
So you can stop paying for Watchful or my sites.
Well,
a fair bit of effort.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if some of this stuff is feeding back into or come from, what is it, that My Joomla or whatever it is, My Guru thing. The other one, I don't remember what it's called now.
Watchful's the one I use.
Watchful, yeah, that one. So, but anyway, so overall it's just a nice thing, some nice toys to play with, but hopefully more extension developers will start providing this sort of stuff for their own code. So if you're doing, I don't know, nightly exports or dumping of data or whatever, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to set up console commands for you, and you can schedule them to happen. So nightly reports, whatever. So there's no more questions. I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Terry. So yeah, the trickier part is probably still writing the plugin, yeah, for the task scheduler or for using the cron, the console, I guess.
Yeah, once you've got one, and this was a hard bit with the console, was trying to find a working example of how to actually set one up. Once I had about 3 places, and between the 3 places I got one that worked, and then you just replicate it, you know, which bits to change, not much. But the cool thing about it is because you're actually creating a Joomla instance, you can use all the standard Joomla functionality. So in that one that I showed there, the second one, all the code, is I'm just calling all my usual models and to get the data. I'm not going out there writing new SQL or anything to do stuff. I just use the stuff that I could do if I push the button on the screen.
Right, cool.